Pas facile, gagner l'argent français, bosser, bosser. Pas facile, gagner l'argent français.
I always save the material that went into each of my videos, the raw footage, the editing files, just in case I ever decide to go back and improve upon them. But not once have I actually reopened an old project once it was finished. That's how life is, incessant, constantly throwing new material at you to be processed. But a few nights ago it occurred to me quite out of the blue that I failed to ever make a chapter about money in my series about my trip to Africa. It's important that I elaborate why I call this out of the blue. Since the footage you're seeing, 6 years have elapsed. During that time, I met my husband, got married, became a mother, and most recently became a teacher. I should have been stressing about school the next day. So I don't know why the concern that kept sleep away was about an oversight during an editing process 6 years ago. But the thought that nags me is that the oversight wasn't strictly accident.
How much is this?
1 city, 1 city.
1 city?
Yes. You need some?
50 pesos.
No, it'll be 1 city. This will be a babon one.
The subject of money in Africa was overall unpleasant for me, and not one that my conscious mind wanted to suss out creatively. Maybe that's why now, as a more mature person than I was then, I feel it's so important to stop what I'm doing and address it. After leaving Africa in February of 2012, I had the same disappointing experience with nearly each of my newfound African friends with whom I corresponded over the internet. They'd inevitably relay some health issue or financial crisis and ask that I help them by wiring them money. One was Musa, a Tuareg who sold jewelry to tourists, and who hosted us in Timbuktu, Mali. In his case, I could easily believe in the authenticity of his plea. Back in early 2012, the Taliban took over Timbuktu right after we left, and surely brought tourism to a standstill. Musa wrote to me from Senegal, to where he said he had fled. He asked for financial assistance, and I sent some by Western Union. Another was Ndirago, a Ghanaian schoolmaster I met through couchsurfing. He had wanted to host Yosee and I in his home, but once in his area, I declined, since we were perfectly happy staying by Ebenezer, who I'll get to later. Ndirago's disappointment was oddly intense, which I didn't understand at the time. But to make it up to him, we accepted his offer to visit the school he opened for destitute children. I remember thinking that his kids were the happiest I ever saw. I don't even remember if we actually donated any money to his cause, although that obviously was the reason he invited us. To a viewer in the audience, it might seem baffling that we wouldn't donate to an inspiring cripple who was clearly helping children. But I trust that throughout this video you'll get a better understanding of the context of our choices. Another friend who later asked for money was Achu, a goal-oriented French teacher who hosted us in Cape Coast, Ghana. His whole family took us in, and it was a lovely experience. His wonderful younger brother Frank accompanied us around the town, and on our last day there, Yosee happily bought him some polo shirts from a clothing store. I remember giving massages to the ladies of the complex where they lived. One of his cousins offered me his hand in marriage, and Achu's sister, Mary, was not shy about her feelings for Yosee. Overall, I felt we were on equal footing in our relationship with Achu. Once back in Israel, he kept in touch with me over Skype. He told me that he and his girlfriend separated, and confessed that he thought he was in love with me. I told him there was no future in that, and soon afterward he told me he needed money for a brain CT scan for some health concern or other. I did wire him the money, but a little begrudgingly, and after confirming that he got it, a while later, I didn't hear from him again. Not long after that, Ndirago wrote to me, asking for some money for a girl with a boil on her arm, and accompanying the email with a photo. I did send him a small sum, and to his great credit he thanked me profusely, updated me on the girl, and even sent me a Christmas card in the mail. He's a good man. And then Musa wrote me that his friend Dramana needed money too. Dramana was a good friend of his, whom he arranged to be our tour guide on our first day in Timbuktu. I really dug him. He was reserved and attentive, On our last night at the festival in the desert, he surprised me by giving me a Tuareg necklace. So when he followed Musa's lead, telling me how bad the situation in Timbuktu was, with many spelling mistakes, and asking for money, I made a feeble attempt to help. But there was some hitch with the money transfer, and I gave up. I was already jaded by this point. I received frequent emails from Dramane and Musa about their troubles, and my replies became fewer and farther between. I truly empathized with them. But why wasn't it enough to empathize, like I did with all my other friends? Of course, this confusion already went on while still in Africa, and each time we felt a financial motive from one of our African friends, it soured the relationship for us. This was a recurring theme among all the Westerners living in Africa that we met. They would speak of some kind of social rift with the locals, but at the heart of it was an uncomfortable sense of neediness which doomed any opportunity for genuine friendship. In our countries, friends don't ask you for money all the time, and if they do, you stop being their friend. This spoiled our relationship with Adama, for example. In the beginning we were charmed by Adama. He was photogenic and catchy. When he realized we were shopping around for a tour guide to Dogon country, he immediately hopped on someone's motorcycle and swept back to us with his tour guide certificate. We later realized that everyone had a tour guide certificate. He was young and hip, kind of a Rastafarian without knowing it. When we started getting the feeling in Dogon country that he was a tour guide only in the sense that he liked adventures and getting paid by foreigners, we swallowed it graciously and took the blame for making a naive choice.
Yeah, man.
But when, later on in the trip, he started pressuring Yosee for money to help him travel up to Timbuktu for the music festival, we dropped the pretenses of being friends. With some money from Yosee, he did make it to the festival, but when we saw him there, it was high and by. We were starting to feel claustrophobic. Like everywhere we went, we were viewed as walking dollar signs. If I thought about it, there was some poetic justice to it. To my mind, we did represent the culture that began the rape and pillage of Africa's wealth, that planted the seeds of our capitalism, and set in motion the wheels of greed. Western commercials are literally painted on the shanty towns. So I should be able to forgive the locals for craving the money they need for the luxuries we're marketing to them. At the same time, some of the people we became close to defied this pattern of behavior. Eskedar, for example, hosted us merely because she liked getting to know people from around the world and sharing what she has. Likewise, Jordanos, the young entrepreneur by whom we couch-surfed in Bahir would cringe at the thought of expecting something from us. Ebenezer was not as worldly as these two, though he was proud of the few couch-surfing guests he had hosted before us. He was and still is an angel, regularly checking up on me on Facebook and sending me God's blessings. He shed tears on the day we left him, and never asked for anything from us. But so often, when we were traveling, we felt we were being seen as money bags, and it caused us to view everyone with suspicion. In touristy areas especially, gangs of children followed you around parroting the local phrase for money or gift. And so, when we stayed at a beautiful resort in Winneba, Ghana, I got the idea to direct a little film on the subject. The resort funded a school for the kids in the next town over, where the adults still subsisted off of fishing. After school, they'd hang out on the beach, and I got some of the kids interested in being in my movie. Yosee would walk out of the river as if having arrived from a distant land. The kids would run up to him and ask him for money. He would have none, since he just walked out of a river, but would offer them something else, a dance, which they'd all partake in, and everyone would find a common cultural ground. Yosee was uncomfortable with the begging bit, but agreed to go along with me. The kids were enthusiastic, and we were on our third take when we were suddenly interrupted. Hello. Good afternoon.
What's the meaning of what you are doing?
A man, maybe someone from the school, cut the shoot short. I said I'm filming a little video, not commercially, just for fun. He was incensed that I was having the kids ask for money. That was an extremely uncomfortable moment for me, and it's not incidental that I never ended up showing that footage before. I was confronted with how offensive the money-grubbing African child stereotype was, I felt ashamed for casting these kids that way, even if a few of them had asked us for money. I felt as if I had unwittingly committed some form of rape. In hindsight, I find it significant that I never planned to edit a video about the subject of money in Africa, since it was one that was alive and beating every day of our trip. And the things we don't want to think about are usually the ones most worth thinking about. Besides, there was one lesson I received which helped me view the beauty in my experiences being asked for money. In Mali, in a beautiful town named Ségou, we stayed for a few days by a white couple named Arthur and Elise. Elise, a Canadian, had been living in Mali for a few years, integrated in local life. She explained to me that I was only seeing half of the coin, Africans asking foreigners for money. But in fact, they do it to each other as well. If someone has acquired some money, he'll be expected to pay for his brother's tuition, his sister's medical bills, and his uncle's funeral. And in Africa, sister, brother, and uncle don't necessarily mean blood relations. People expect financial help from each other because it's unacceptable that one person should hoard money for himself when others are in need. So to some of the people I befriended in Africa, who assumed I had money to spare, it seemed obvious that I should share when they were in need. It's an incredibly different and quite beautiful way of thinking about money that deep down I'm not ready to adopt, because it would mean being ready to part with what I have, everything that is beyond what I need, for the good of those around me. And that means giving up on the Western idea of success.
All the system makes us like just helping each other, you know? We live together. That can explain, like in Africa, people live together. There is no individual life that you can like live, oh, okay, this is my apartment, like I'm going to live there, blah blah. No, like you live with people.
I'm tired of this race. I don't want to work anymore, like to achieve and to...
No meaning.
Everything here and die.
You achieve things and then later on you're buried 1 meter under the ground and you can't take it.
There is more out there to explore, you know?
Rather than collecting
having
fancy things.
Yeah.
If anything, these 6 years that separate me from Africa, with the wedding, the house, the children, the job, have led me ever deeper into that tunnel of aspiration. But perhaps, in the middle of the night, in the twilight of consciousness, the goal of my own financial stability is not yet so ingrained. Perhaps in this twilight, the memory of a financial paradigm so different from ours can surface to remind me of a selfless way of thinking of money.
Gagner l'argent français, bosser, bosser, pas facile. Gagner l'argent français.